My last topic that the CCC training team wanted me to actually cover was reinfection or repositivity. Now, this is something that we are often asked. My patient has a reinfection and he still has a PCR positive. He had 2 negative PCRs and now has a positive PCR, and he has a reinfection. So I think a lot of these cases were being reported earlier in China, Korea, and later on even in the US and Europe. And what they actually found was the median time of testing positive from discharge was about 12 days. Most were positive by serology, and this were the possible reasons for positivity following negative result. One, persistent viral shedding. Second, intermittent viral shedding. So persistent and intermittent. So a lot of these, in fact, we have patients writing us mails after mails after mails. I think one patient has written some 5 letters to the MS office complaining how our result was positive, but he repeated the same test in 2 other labs and they were negative on a day prior and a day after. So it's really a matter of great consternation for physicians, for patients, and various other Sri Hospital Infection Control Committees, the laboratories as well. Reinfection with a new strain can happen. It's extraordinarily rare. As you can see that there are only, I think, 38 odd reports that have been there in literature. Less than 50 definitely, maybe it's gone up in the last 2 days. But if you compare it to the number of cases that have been reported worldwide, which is 38 million, it's comparatively much, much less. So I think keep that perspective in mind. Is extraordinarily rare and should not be a first diagnosis when you're actually seeing a patient. So this is a true infection that was reported in Nevada, and what they really did was they took both the sequences that he had, one when he was actually reported positive for the first time, and when he came back with a repeat positive test, and both the samples were actually sequenced, and they had significant discordant with single nucleotide variants at 2 points. So the final conclusion here was yes, that this particular gentleman did actually have a reinfection with a different strain. So reinfection is rare, and what we recommend is do not retest for 3 months following the first test. And this recommendation has been made by CDC and by various other bodies saying that do not retest unless there are extenuating circumstances and there is a very, very high risk of a very similar clinical syndrome, which tells you that you need to actually retest. And what is this based on? And this is actually based on how a primary exposure protects actually to a certain extent against reinfection. So maybe in the first 3 months, do not retest. This evidence has not been generated in humans, but we are awaiting that data. So just to report to you some reported reinfections from countries, but they have very, very specific definitions that are there actually. There are 2 cases that have been reported in India as well, and second episode of infection showed a significantly higher viral loads, and this also has been actually been reported, and they've been sequenced to show genetically distinct SARS-CoV-2. So reinfection is very rare, less than 50 case reports. I think it's important that there are certain criteria that you lay down to determine whether it's actually a reinfection. It's difficult for us to really be certain because there is no routine community screening. So we are actually missing all the asymptomatic cases which have probably become reinfected. Instead, we only pick up the severely ill reinfection. So the true reinfectivity rate is probably difficult to determine. This will also have implications with regard to vaccine development, and as you know, genetic sequencing is not available in every laboratory in the country, and that again limits the identification of reinfection. So I'm going to summarize and finish, and hopefully take some of the questions that are there. And so COVID-19 is spread mainly by droplet and contacts, airborne precautions only while performing aerosol generating procedures. This stratification is necessary and for rational and appropriate use of PPE. IPC of COVID-19 hospital is only possible through multidisciplinary teams with constant reevaluation protocols and generation of data. Contact tracing is labor intensive, but actually can be pretty rewarding and can indirectly reinforce your PPE policies, which is what we did. Home isolation can reduce hospital burden to a fair extent, and quarantine policies should be sensible, should take into account actual risk and the manpower structure that is actually available. Preoperative screening is an accepted policy all over the world. Each institution needs to constantly reevaluate its policies to facilitate smooth functioning and to ensure that the patients and staff are protected. There is no doubt that there is increased perioperative mortality during surgery performed in COVID, and there is a similar increase noted in hematological malignancies and transplant patients. Reinfection is rare and should actually clearly be differentiated from G-positive. So thank you for your patient listening, and I'm going to hand over to Dr. Joy, who's our moderator for the rest of the session.
Thank you, Dr. Priscilla, for that clear talk and covering all the areas that that our team wanted you to present. There are a few questions. I'll just take it from the top. The first one is from Dr. Ashita Singh. Can a moderately ill patient be safely shifted to a regular non-COVID care area after 10 days of symptoms? Example, if they require high levels of oxygen support not available in the COVID area.
Okay, so Ashita, I don't have a perfect answer, but I'm going to tell you what we do. So we actually do not shift to a non-COVID area after 10 days of symptoms. We actually shift to a non-COVID area only after 3 weeks, after the date of the positivity. So we don't take it as based on symptoms, we take it from the date of the positive test. So that actually cuts short the duration, and from there, we actually take it as 3 weeks and then shift them to a non-COVID area. Technically, you need to evolve your own policies, because remember, when you're talking about 9 days of non-viability of the virus, it's actually a median. So it can be more, it can be less. So I think you need to play it safe. Anything that is 3 weeks will definitely be safe, which is why we made a policy of 3 weeks. Okay, Joy.
Yeah, the next question is from Dr. Sangeeta Kakodia. What should I do if I get anxiety during the coronavirus pandemic? When should I seek medical attention during the coronavirus disease pandemic?
Okay. Okay. So anxiety is a part and parcel of COVID pandemic, I think, and I think as the pandemic has gone on, the anxiety level has lessened. But medically, if you look at your question, so it depends on what you're anxious about. Are you anxious about a breach in PP? Are you anxious about actually having the disease? So having the disease, there is not a doubt at all. If you are symptomatic, you have to get tested. But if you remain asymptomatic and if you've had a breach in your PP and you have been exposed to an aerosol generating procedure from an infected patient who probably is in the acute stage of infection, of course, you need to report to your superior and then take action depending on what your local hospital policy says. So what we would do, I mean, for us, it has not really happened, but if that has happened, for some reason in your healthcare setting, then of course you report to your supervisor and then get quarantined and then report if there is any development of symptoms anywhere between 7 to 10 days.
Another question from her. Will climate change make the COVID-19 pandemic worse? I assume that you're telling about it becoming colder.
So remember, Corona came when it was cold. It did not come when it was hot. So we thought actually as the heat increased, the pandemic would go away. All our predictions were wrong. And this did not actually happen. Do we know what happens to it with increased levels of humidity, with increased levels of change in climate? Actually, there is not too much data that has been generated. Data has come from different parts of the world, and it seems like it doesn't seem to really affect the coronavirus. Dry air, so if there is humidity, there is chances that it will persist because it is a droplet infection, and it can be aerosol generating when there is actually increased humidity in the air. But we don't have evidence-based data at the moment, and there is no clear-cut data. There's only one study which came out sometime in April, if I remember right. But apart from that, there has really not been too much data with regard to that.
To see, there is one question which is a slightly, I'm confused. From Dr. Mercy Berry, prolonged shedding of virus up to 3 to 4 months. Viable virus not isolated after viable virus not isolated.
Correct.
On 8 days.
Okay, I get your point. So, Dr. Mercy, what it really means, when we say viable virus, we're talking about the virus which can be grown in culture, which means it's a live virus. So viable virus is only detectable generally up to about 9 to 10 days. Remember, this is a median, which means there is a before and there can be an after as well. But when we talk about prolonged shedding of the virus, we're talking about RNA positivity, which means your RT-PCR is positive. But if you try to grow the virus, which we can't because none of us have a BSL-3 laboratory, you won't be able to grow the virus beyond 10 days. You will not be able to grow the virus, but your test will continually come positive. Remember, our tests are not based like microbiology gives us a bacterial culture report that indicates viable bacteria. But here it's not, we cannot really tell about a viable virus because we cannot do these tests unless there is a BSL-3 facility.
Can N95 mask be reused after disinfecting with detergents?
No, please do not disinfect with detergents. I think you will actually interfere with the physical integrity of the N95 mask. So please do not reuse N95 mask. What you can actually do is actually keep the mask in a brown paper cover, which actually dehydrates the N95 mask. So if there have been any virus which has been deposited on the N95 mask, it dries out, and you can technically use the same mask after 48 to 72 hours. But you cannot disinfect it with a detergent. Please do not even try.
What is incubation validity?
I'm not sure what that question means. So the incubation period varies from 5 to 14 days. So when you talk about an incubation period, you're talking about development of symptoms from exposure. So anytime after exposure, say today is day 0, I've been exposed, day 5 onwards up to day 14 is a time when I can actually develop symptoms of infection. Hopefully that has kind of answered the question.
How do we identify asymptomatic carriers?
Same way that we identify symptomatic patients. So basically do a real-time PCR, nasopharyngeal swab, the same way, no difference.
RT-PCR is negative, but CT lung positive. What's the interpretation?
Okay, good question. Clinical scenario needs to be taken into consideration. If your RT-PCR is negative, it could mean two things. One, basically the sample was not taken correctly. You've not taken a proper nasopharyngeal swab. That could be one thing. They can be intermittent viral shedding. So maybe at that point in time, virus was not being shed. Third thing is the sensitivity of PCR is never 100%. It's very important to remember that it varies anywhere from 70 to 90%. So what should you do if you suspect strongly that this is a COVID-19 infection, your CT is positive, then think in terms of whether repeating the RT-PCR test, maybe 3 days down the line, treating them as COVID-19 infection positive. Remember, a CT of the lung just shows a radiological picture. It does not give you a microbiological or a virological diagnosis. So always think in terms of differential diagnosis. There are any number of cases where we found heart failure, we found ARDS of scrub typhus, dengue, That's all happening now, actually, as a matter of fact. And everybody is so focused on COVID, they forget that you can actually have the same picture with other diseases.
I think that's what I was going to tell, because we are having TB, we are having um, other pneumonia. So please don't forget other infections. There is a similar question. RT-PCR negative but fever, no taste or smell. PCR negative but CT thorax highly suggestive. Similar question.
So yes, you're quite right that if you have no taste or smell, so ageusia and anosmia are very specific features for COVID-19 infection. And you have fever, and if you have a CT thorax that is highly suggestive, please treat it as COVID-19 infection and go ahead and repeat an RT-PCR couple of days down the line.
Next question. When can you shift patient from COVID positive to negative ward or ICU?
So like I mentioned, there is no clear-cut guideline, but we would expect normally a patient to be negative after 14 days. So not negative, sorry, that's a wrong word to use. The patient to not have viable virus in their nasopharynx after 14 days. But to be on the safe side and to account for people who can actually shed viable virus actually for a prolonged period of time, we actually make it 3 weeks. In a pinch, it can be shorter than that, but generally up to 2 weeks we should. We actually say 3 weeks, shifting from a COVID positive to a negative area ward or ICU. That is our protocol, 3 weeks.
Next question. Some people after recovery complain of prolonged asthenia. Cause and treatment, please.
So the cause is basically a viral asthenia, post-viral asthenia. Chronic fatigue syndrome is increasingly being described, and you're very, very right. I don't think there is any treatment for that. Post-viral asthenia, you can't really have any treatment. Many people feel ill. A lot of these patients are the ones who actually haven't been treated in the past. So now, as you know, remdesivir can actually prevent progression of disease. So a lot of these people who actually complain of, we've actually done some kind of prelim work for what we call as a post-COVID syndrome. And a lot of them do not have pulmonary fibrosis. A lot of them have less cardiac complications and less asthenia. But it's really just a observation, and we are awaiting evidence and data at the moment.
There's a long comment. We are taught to treat patients rather than the numbers on a lab or a pathology report. However, COVID-19 pathology has made us rethink this paradigm. How much of a risk is there for us physicians in either underdiagnosing or overdiagnosing COVID? We are, after all, in a war-like situation currently, and we may sometimes, as a knee-jerk reaction, tend to shoot first and ask questions later.
So I love that question, by the way. It's very philosophical. But you're absolutely right. And I think that's why I said constant reevaluation and data generation is key. So in this situation, when in an epidemic, you have to think in terms of an epidemic first. Should we think of every patient who has lung pathology as COVID first? Yes, by all means, yes. But remember, it's a differential diagnosis. So it also, even when I've gone back to my routine work now, and I'm dealing with ID consultations, and I have to make the resident think, okay, COVID-19, yes, but what is second, third, fourth, fifth? So I think it's very important. We are all physicians at heart, and I think it's very important to keep other things in mind. Once you have a negative PCR, you can think further. But even if you have a positive PCR, always think in terms of what else could contribute to the clinical picture apart from COVID, because you can never say with certainty whether COVID is actually causing the clinical picture that you're dealing with. So it's a very difficult scenario. I totally agree. But we are in a war-like situation, like you said. So think COVID first, but also do not stop thinking about the other thing.
Can you discuss post-COVID medical problems?
Oh, goodness. That's a whole lecture on its own. So I'm not really going to discuss it, but increasingly lung problems, the pulmonary fibrosis is being described. COVID cardiomyopathy is being described. Thrombotic complications are described. Stroke, heart attack, or myocardial infarctions, deep venous thrombosis. All of them are actually being described. Post-viral asthenia, major problem. all of these are actually being described today. So kidney failure, people going on, having acute kidney injuries and going on to develop chronic kidney disease with proteinuria, all of those are actually being described as well.
Next one is, what is the percentage of healthcare workers infected in your hospital? Is it wise to employ them in COVID wards, ICU once they recover from infection?
So well, I don't know whether I'm allowed to give this data out, but I can tell you it's less than 10%. That's all I'm going to tell you right now. And it's a tribute to our healthcare workers that they've actually followed all the protocols. Is it right to, can we employ them? By all means, you can employ them in COVID wards and ICU once they recover from infection. But employing them again and again, only those who have had COVID, is also a cause for fatigue. And COVID has led to major workplace fatigue actually for people who are dealing with both COVID and non-COVID problems. So can you employ them? Yes, absolutely, you can employ them. But I think not just them. We should actually make sure that everybody is given some rest.
There are two related questions. I'll take them together. Are swabs other than nasopharyngeal being done in CMC, and is it as sensitive? And the other question is, can we go for BAL for PCR negative and CT positive?
So lower respiratory samples are actually shown to be of great utility, in fact, better sensitivity. Both sputum and BAL have good PCR positivity. But that's as reported in literature. For some reason, in our hospital, we found that our nasopharyngeal swabs are actually better than our yield of sputum and BAL. But that was some time ago. We probably need to reevaluate our data to see if there is any particular difference.
There is a personal question. I tested positive on 9th, Dr. Minlan, and repeated today, 19th, and the result is still positive. That's 10 days later. Whereas my wife tested negative on both occasions. We are staying together with our two kids, one tested positive and the other negative, with not so much social distancing. What could be the reason for the negative test? Today is day 13 from the day of symptoms.
Okay, so remember, when you are exposed, there is a host that you take into consideration. So the host, okay, it's not like it's always 100% transmission. So yes, your wife did not get symptoms, or rather, your wife remained asymptomatic and remained negative. She may have very robust T cells, which are actually warding off the virus very well. So there's no real absolute reason per se. With regard to you, if I look at it, you are tested positive on the 9th. So if you look at 9th of October, so 19th, so that is actually only 10 days. It's not day 13 though, from your day of...
He's talking about symptoms, I think.
Okay, day 13 from the day of symptom. Yeah, okay, yeah. The chances are that you don't have a viable virus anymore. Would I recommend that you continue to use a mask at home to protect your wife and kids? Absolutely. Scrupulous hand hygiene, physical distance as much as is possible, I think needs to be maintained. So we can only be pragmatic in these situations. There is no correct answer. I think if your children or if your wife and child, the one who's negative, still have not really become positive yet, chances are they may not become positive, but even if they do, I think you'll be able to detect them early. That's all I can really say.
Last but one, what kind of PP is used by healthcare workers for women in labor? Is an RT-PCR tested? What if a woman presents without an RT-PCR?
Okay, so PPE for women in labor is the same as full PPE actually. So we recommend everything because we don't know what kind of aerosols will be generated. We don't have enough data about how much viral load is there in amniotic fluid. Unlikely there'll be any, but we can't take that risk till more data is available. So it's full PPE. We actually recommend an N95 mask with visors, surgical gowns, gloves, and yeah, that's what we actually recommend. What do we? So for us, since we have people, we cohort women who are untested in labor separately from those who are tested. So that's the way we are cohorting in our labor room. So untested women and positive women go to the same area for a delivery. So full PPE is actually used.
I think a similar question, are oral swabs as valid as nasopharyngeal swabs?
So yeah, that's a very good question. There is increasing data that saliva is another sample that can be used for testing a real-time PCR. There is increasingly data available. Saliva, yes. A simple oral swab, no. So I think we don't have enough data in our hospital and in our country yet for us to use saliva as a sample. So data is just being generated at the moment.
I think the previous person who gave the same philosophical question has come up with another question. COVID actually is infecting personalities, not persons or patients. Any truth to this statement? I think we'll keep it to medical discussion here because we are running out of time. Dr. Winsley, over to you.
Thank you, Priscilla, and for this really lucid presentation and the wonderful discussion that it generated, and also Dr. Joy for moderating the session. I must also thank the COVID Command Center training team, which has been instrumental actually in putting together these lecture series possible. There are going to be 5 online learning modules, including an NIV learning module, which is going to be available. And CMC is trying to do a weekly newsletter for COVID update, which will also become available from this week onwards. And there is a WhatsApp group, which is being organized for NIV, ICU care, and COVID care. If any of you any of you are interested in subscribing to any of these, you can email the email address that I had earlier typed on this. That is ccctraining@cmcvelo.ac.in. Thank you.